When most people think of mythology, they think of Greece. Zeus throwing lightning from Mount Olympus. Poseidon commanding the seas. Hermes carrying messages between worlds. Apollo driving the sun across the sky. These are the gods the world knows. These are the gods that fill museums, inspire Hollywood films, and dominate every mythology channel on the internet. But here is what those museums and those films and those channels never tell you. Every single one of those Greek gods has an African original. Older. More complex. Worshipped thousands of years before Greece had a written language. Today we are going to meet 5 of them. 5 African gods who existed before the Greek Pantheon, and whose stories the world chose to forget. Before we meet the gods, you need to understand the timeline. The Greek Pantheon, Zeus, Athena, Apollo, Hermes, Poseidon, as we know it today, emerged around 800 to 700 BC. That is when Homer wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey. That is when the Greek gods took the form the world recognizes. Now hold that date in your mind. The Egyptian civilization, located in northeastern Africa, had already been worshipping its gods for over 5,000 years before Homer picked up his pen. 5,000 years. To put that in perspective, the distance in time between us and ancient Greece is roughly 2,700 years. The distance between ancient Greece and ancient Egypt's earliest recorded religion is almost double that. Greece was not the beginning of mythology. Greece was not even close to the beginning. And the gods that Greece eventually worshipped, the gods they named cities after, the gods their philosophers debated, the gods their greatest conquerors claimed as fathers, those gods had African faces long before they had Greek names. This is not speculation. This is not Afrocentric revisionism. This is documented by archaeologists, recorded by the Greeks themselves, and written into the stone of temples that were ancient when Athens was still a village. Here are 5 of them. The first god is Osiris. If you know Greek mythology, you know Dionysus, the god of death, rebirth, and transformation. A god who died and came back. A god whose followers believed in life after death through union with the divine. Scholars have noted for over a century that the story of Dionysus is strikingly similar to a far older African story. The story of Osiris. Osiris is the Egyptian lord of the underworld and judge of the dead. His worship began in the pre-dynastic period of Egypt, around 6000 BC. 6000 BC. That is 8,000 years ago. His story is this. Osiris was a great king who was murdered by his brother Seth, dismembered, and scattered across the earth. His wife Isis gathered the pieces of his body, used her divine magic to resurrect him, and conceived a son, Horus, who would avenge his father's death and restore order to the world. Death. Resurrection. A divine son born to restore justice. If that story sounds familiar, it should. It is the oldest version of one of mythology's most repeated narratives. The dying and rising god. The story that would later appear in Dionysus, in Thoth, in Adonis, and in religious traditions far beyond mythology. Osiris told it first. 8,000 years before Dionysus wore a vine crown on a Greek hillside, an African king was already rising from the dead in the temples of Egypt. The second god is Ra. Apollo is perhaps the most celebrated god in the Greek pantheon. The god of the sun, light, truth, and prophecy. The god whose chariot drives the sun across the sky each day. The god whose temple at Delphi was the most sacred site in the ancient Greek world. Apollo emerged in Greek mythology around the 8th century BC. Ra had been driving the sun across the African sky for 5,000 years before Apollo existed. The earliest evidence of Ra's worship in ancient Egypt dates to rock carvings around 6000 BC. By the time of the Old Kingdom, around 2600 BC, Ra was already the supreme solar deity of the most powerful civilization on Earth. His story is this. Each day, Ra sails across the sky in his solar bark, a divine boat of light carrying the sun from east to west. Each night he descends into the underworld, battles the great serpent Apophis who seeks to destroy the sun, defeats him, and rises again at dawn. The sun rises. Ra has won again. Every single morning. The Greeks, who had extensive contact with Egypt and openly acknowledged learning from Egyptian civilization, took the concept of a solar deity who drove the sun across the sky and gave it a Greek name and a Greek face. They called him Apollo. But the original, the god who did it first, the god who fought to bring the sun back every single night for thousands of years before Greece was a civilization, was an African god. His name was Ra. The third god is Thoth. In the Greek Pantheon, the title of wisdom belongs to Athena, goddess of wisdom, war strategy, and divine intelligence. But when the Greeks encountered the African god of wisdom and needed to explain what they found, it was not Athena they reached for. It was Hermes. Hermes shared the domain of wisdom with Athena, but where Athena represented divine strategic intelligence, Hermes represented something closer to what Thoth actually was, the keeper of sacred knowledge, the master of writing, the guide between worlds. The cleverest of all the Olympians. Here is what most people do not know. The Greeks named a city after his African predecessor. Thoth is the Egyptian god of writing, wisdom, knowledge, and the moon. His origins in Egyptian mythology go back to the pre-dynastic period, 5000 BC or earlier. He was believed to have invented hieroglyphics, the calendar, and the science of the stars. He was the scribe of the gods, the keeper of divine records, the one who weighed the hearts of the dead at judgment. When the Greeks encountered Thoth, and they encountered him extensively, because Egypt and Greece had centuries of contact, they were so struck by the parallel between Thoth and their own god Hermes that they named an entire Egyptian city after the comparison. They called it Hermopolis, the city of Hermes. But the city's original Egyptian name meant something else entirely. It meant the city of Thoth. And later, much later, when Greek philosophers encountered the full depth of Thoth's wisdom tradition, they created a figure they called Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes the thrice great, directly combining their own god with the African god he was modeled on. The Greeks did not invent the god of wisdom. They borrowed him. They just changed his name. The fourth god is Amun, Zeus, the king of the gods, the father of gods and men, the supreme deity of the Greek Pantheon who howls lightning from Mount Olympus and rules all existence. The Greeks themselves recorded his African original. Amun is the ancient Egyptian supreme sky god, the king of all gods, the self-created creator deity, the champion of the poor and the center of personal devotion across the ancient world. His worship is attested from the Old Kingdom, over 4,000 years ago. At the height of his power, Amun-Ra was the most widely worshipped deity on earth. Ancient scholars directly identified Amun as the equivalent of Zeus. Ancient inscriptions called Amun the king of the gods, centuries before Zeus held that title. But the most powerful evidence is not academic. It comes from the greatest Greek conqueror in history. Alexander the Great, student of Aristotle, conqueror of Persia, the most powerful military commander the ancient world had ever seen, was taught by his tutor that the best way to win the loyalty of Egypt was to respect its gods. When Alexander arrived in Egypt after his Persian campaign, he did not claim to be the son of Zeus. He traveled to the desert oracle at Siwa, one of the most sacred sites of Amun worship in the ancient world, and he claimed to be the son of Amun-Ra, the son of an African god. The greatest Greek conqueror in history chose an African deity as his divine father. Not because he was confused. Not because he was being polite. Because in the ancient world, even the Greeks knew that African gods were older, more powerful, and more worthy of the claim. The fifth god is Anubis. Hermes in Greek mythology wore many faces. One of his most important roles was a psychopomp, the guide of souls from the world of the living to the world of the dead. The escort of the deceased through the underworld. This role too has an African original. Anubis is the ancient Egyptian god of death, mummification, and the weighing of souls. In the Old Kingdom, around 2575 BC, before Osiris rose to his full prominence, Anubis was considered the principal god of the dead. The guardian of the underworld. The one who weighed the heart of every person who died against the feather of Ma'at, the feather of truth, to determine their fate in the afterlife. His image is one of the most recognizable in all of ancient art, the jackal-headed god standing over the scales of judgment, holding the fate of every human soul in his hands. Anubis was performing this role, guiding the dead, weighing their hearts, determining their eternal fate, for over 2,000 years before Greece had a mythology. 2,000 years. While Greece was still in its earliest formation, Anubis was already ancient. While Homer was writing his epics, Anubis had been walking the dead to judgment for longer than Greece had existed as a civilization. The guide of souls did not begin in Greece. He began in Africa. And he wore the head of a jackal. Let us be clear about what we have just established. Osiris, 6000 BC. Dionysus, 800 BC. Ra, 6000 BC. Apollo, 800 BC. Thoth, 5000 BC. Hermes, 800 BC. Amun, 4000 BC. Zeus, 800 BC. Anubis, 2575 BC. The Greek underworld tradition, 800 BC. In every single case, the African god came first. In several cases, the Greeks knew it and documented it themselves. They named cities after African gods. Their greatest philosophers traveled to Egypt to learn from African priests. Their greatest conqueror claimed an African god as his father. The story of world mythology does not begin in Greece. It begins in Africa. In the temples along the Nile that were ancient when Athens was still being built. In the stories carved into rock faces 8,000 years ago. In the cosmologies developed by African civilizations that the rest of the world would spend centuries trying to catch up to. Greece did not invent mythology. Greece inherited it. And it inherited it from Africa. The gods on this list are not obscure. They are not forgotten footnotes of ancient history. They are the originals. The templates from which the world's most celebrated mythology was drawn. The source material that Greece took, renamed, and sent out into the world under new labels, and the world accepted those labels because nobody told them to look further back. We are telling you now. Look further back. The further back you look, the more African the story becomes. Osiris rose before Dionysus. Ra burned before Apollo. Thoth rode before Hermes. Amun rode before Zeus. Anubis judged before the Greeks had an underworld. The untold gods were never really forgotten. They were just waiting for someone to say their names again. If you want to go deeper into the gods, the histories, and the truth Africa never lost, subscribe. New video every week.